Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of Killer Score. Do we count the guest episodes, or we just make them special episodes?
Oh, they're all count.
Oh,
They
okay.
count,
I
so
didn't know if
28.
I didn't know if we would put them in their own category. But yes, this is Killer Score. For those of you first joining us now, potentially, this is the podcast that talks about cult classic movies with killer soundtracks that we feel deserve more recognition. Not just the films themselves, but their composers as well. And we have an interesting one today because it's our first live action film we're ever covering on Killer Score, and also, I believe, our first Chinese film we're ever covering.
Yes, actually. Definitely the first Chinese film.
Yeah, we've covered Asian films on here before, but mostly Japanese stuff. Have we covered any Korean films or anything like that?
No, we have not.
No, but we've been meaning to.
Yeah, there's definitely some Korean films I would like to cover on here. I've considered sometime, it won't be this year for this year's Halloween, but I've considered maybe for like a spooky season sometime of doing Thirst.
Ooh.
The Korean vampire film, which is really good. Neither of you have seen it, and I've been meaning to show you guys it. Really good stuff. You know how big of a Park Chan-wook fan I am. But yeah, all right. So today we have a very special one, Hard Boiled, the classic 92 action film that was actually the last of John Woo's so-called heroic bloodshed films. Which starred characters that, as the title implied, were very heroic, but they killed a lot of people over the course of the film.
That sounds like a Cantonese Clint Eastwood character there.
So this one was inspired by the fact that John Woo realized he hadn't done like your classic, loose cannon cop film. He had gotten criticism for all of his films focusing on criminals, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to make a movie with, like cops this time, because he wanted to try something different, and he wanted to look at different angles. So, we have multiple cop characters in this film, and it basically focuses around the police. Between Chow Yun Fat's character, who is your classic hard-boiled detective cop who like kills a lot of people, breaks all the rules, and on the other end of the spectrum you've got Tony Leung, who some of you probably know if you're Hong Kong action cinephiles. You might know him from Infernal Affairs, which of course got a remake known as Internal Affairs over here.
Actually, that was The Departed over here.
The Departed, yeah.
And Internal Affairs was the title of the original film.
No, the original is called Infernal Affairs. See?
Let's see. I want to say that Blu-ray had a typo there, but I have been wrong about things before.
Yeah, it's Infernal Affairs. Because I believe the title refers to how a lot of like gangs and a lot of cops have like I believe it's Yao Guai, the war god, is like their like symbol. Like even like police have like this like Chinese war god as their symbol.
Oh yeah.
I think he was also the one that was used in the a film we could also cover on here. My Name is Bruce. Have you seen My Name is Bruce?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, that's a good one. Erin, you haven't seen that, but you would
Nope.
love it. It's Bruce Campbell playing himself.
Oh, it is
okay.
Infernal Affairs.
I told you. But no, this one is really cool because it's an oddity actually in John Woo's career. It's sort of the pinnacle of like his action work, I would say. And that became, back in the day, that was kind of a hot take, but it's become much more accepted over time.
Yeah. I have fond memories of all sorts of action movies that my older brother, shout out to you, Chris, love you, all the action movies that he had showed me as a kid that I had no business touching. He had a VHS copy of this somehow, and Rumble in the Bronx.
It might have actually been the Criterion one, because Criterion released this film twice. They had the original home distribution rights for the U.S., and the versions of Hard Boiled that were originally in the U.S. were a Laserdisc and a VHS version.
Oh, wow. Criterion is like the unsung hero of killer score between this and all my Jim Jarmusch movies.
Yeah, they actually started in the 80s.
And Quadrophenia, too.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, this was John Woo branching out, like I said, and he also did many different things for this. Not only he brought back some like regulars, like he'd done stuff with Chow Yun Fat before, and Chow Yun Fat is like, if you folks aren't familiar, we're gonna make you familiar. Chow Yun Fat is one of the greatest unsung action stars in the Western world.
Professional actor, amazing stuntman, on par with Jackie Chan, and just the sweetest guy ever, if any of those interviews with him are to be believed.
Yeah, because he's big in the East, but he's like not talked about as much as he should be over here.
Yeah, the only role I can think of that, like, people probably over here know him for is he was one of the pirates in Pirates 3.
I would argue people also know him for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
That was my other thing.
Yep. And I'll say it, as fucking awful as Dragon Ball Evolution was, I could not possibly, if I tried, think of anyone better to be Roshi, and he did really good.
Jackie Chan. I feel like Jackie Chan nails Roshi perfectly, personality-wise, to be honest.
Yeah.
If they had gotten Jackie Chan, he would have been perfect. Because let us not forget that one of Roshi's alternate identities that he'd used in Dragon Ball was Jackie Chun. So that would have been perfect. But no, Chow Yun Fat's a solid pick for that.
And like I said, he was the only one who looked like he was having any goddamn fun in that movie.
If they had adapted more from original Dragon Ball, I feel like he would have made an amazing Tao Pai Pai.
Oh, yeah.
Or a good Crane Hermit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is unusual when it comes to most action films because what kind of soundtracks would you guys say action movies typically have?
Whole lot of percussion heavy orchestral scores with big giant chime stings. You know, your John Williams type stuff.
Yeah.
My other thing is the action movies that use more contemporary music for when the film was made. Which you do see that sometimes.
Yeah.
You don't see as often as people trying to mimic John Williams.
Yeah, like one person I could think of who did what like Erin saying a lot is like the films that a lot of films, the scores of the films that Cameron directed. You know, the Terminator films and stuff.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But no, this one is very unusual in that the action scenes are actually pretty sparse for music. It's when we're not in the middle of the action that the score is more prominent and hard-boiled.
Oh.
And
kind of like a previous subject, Ghost Dog Way the Samurai, where it was used as underscore and ambience and went silent whenever action scenes happened.
Yeah, and for this movie, John Woo actually got a composer he was a big fan of, someone who wasn't really that well known for film scores. He had done a few before, but it wasn't his primary thing. I am, of course, talking about Michael Gibbs, a jazz composer who Woo was a fan of, who had before this only done a few film scores, and after this only did a few film scores. In fact, Gibbs is mostly known for production work. He did it for musicians like Peter Gabriel, Joni Mitchell, and Pat Metheny and Whitney Houston.
Oh, wow.
And in 2017, Gibbs even received an honorary doctorate in music from Berkeley.
Oh.
Yeah, so he is when it comes to jazz production, he's like a big guy.
He's a big name. Gets tossed around in any jazz conversations you have.
Yeah. So Woo got him for this, and jazz not only factors into the score, it's a part of the film a bit. This film changed a lot over the course of development. John Woo wanted to go back to doing a darker film like he kind of did back in the day, like The Killer. Like, that's one of his more dark films that people tend to talk about.
The title alone is kind of evocative of pulp novels and crime thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, the original script was a lot darker, but he was actually convinced otherwise during production. Basically, it was one of those things where it was like, hey, John, maybe change that. Maybe tone it down a bit. And, they came out better. And the film did have a interesting production, and some of it actually was kind of troubled. So much like the genre that the score uses, this film was pretty improvisational.
Free form.
Yeah. John Woo had always encouraged his stars to kind of like improvise action stuff because, he wanted it to feel more natural. So Chow Yun Fat actually came up with some stuff in the film, such as the iconic baluster slide, which was actually Chow Yun Fat's idea.
One of the most iconic and influential moves in any action movie.
Yeah, it really informs the style of action that John Woo is known for, which a lot of people have referred to as a bullet ballet. Because John, unlike the more like, gritty and hardcore action films, John Woo's stuff is like almost poetic, and it is. It's almost like ballet. It's like very choreographed.
Very theatrical as well.
Yeah, that's why everyone jokes about the doves in John Woo movies, because he likes to make a big show out of things,
Mm-hmm.
They're like what Basset Hounds are to like a Mamoru Oshii movie.
Yeah, there was definitely some troubled stuff during this. The biggest cases being with the hospitals, the famous hospital scene.
Oof.
For those who are unaware, the hospital scene is like the big climax of the film, which takes place in a hospital. So I won't spoil it that much. However, I will say there's one scene in this that could only be done in one take, and because they were literally destroying things, that's all they got.
Oh God.
So, and that scene goes on for like 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
And there was also an accident with pyrotechnics at one point that Chow Yun Fat got singed by, and he was arguing with John Woo before, so they had to cut it out of the film. But in the original audio, you could hear Chow Yun Fat shouting, "He's trying to kill me."
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And there was just other issues along with it, such as
you don't say.
Yeah. Production was troubled with half-hour scenes getting cut from the film.
Christ.
Anthony Wong hated his character in working with Woo. They just did not get along. And both Tony Leung and Chow Yun Fat sustained onset injuries. There's like a scene where like I believe it was either happened to Woo or it either happened to Chow Yun Fat or it happened to Leung. One of them got like a shard of glass, just like barely missed their eye and just like hit the like corner. Yeah. So, but they also did have some luck because the iconic opening action scene, they were allowed to go as ham as possible as they wanted because it was a tea house that was set to be demolished.
Yep.
And funny enough, that led to a bit of trouble during production just due to the simple fact that it was in a formerly public area. So a bunch of people showed up like, hey, what's all these gunshots going? Oh, they're filming a John Woo movie. And then they had to be like, get away. What are you doing? We're trying to film a movie here. But interestingly enough, despite this being the John Woo movie that gets talked about the most in the U.S., it's only because it has a strong cult following over here. It didn't do anything over here because it barely got released. And it was only a moderate success in its homeland.
I have a feeling that the retroactive recognition comes a lot from his more stateside, ubiquitous movies like Face Off.
Yeah, because this was the last film he did in China before going Hollywood for a bit, and then finally going back to China to do some films again. But that was for a while. He was in the U.S. for a while.
It has been years since I have seen this movie. Like I said, my memories are vague and based on my childhood fascination with action scenes that made my brain go burr.
Yeah, and there's a lot of interesting trivia I can't wait to get into more on the movie. I think the last thing I want to talk about before we get into watching the screening, though, is how this film actually was one of the funny things I really wanted to talk about with this movie, aside from the fact that if you're going to watch this, it's actually pretty rare in the U.S. Believe it or not, this movie has only been released a few times. There are the initial Criterion releases we talked about, and then in the US it got picked up by distribution rights got picked up by Dragon Dynasty A label I have a couple movies from. They're basically the label that specializes in importing action movies from the east to the west. They're a subsidiary of Miramax, and I believe I read Quentin Tarantino is actually heavily involved with making the Dragon Dynasty sub-label.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
For him, definitely. His documented love of martial arts movies.
Yeah, and but yeah, so if you're gonna watch this, I'm gonna say try to find a VPN version of this because it's not really available for streaming in the US from what I could find. And it seems to be available overseas, but unless you live in certain territories, you might have to use a VPN because I have the latest printing of this in the US, which is the Dragon Dynasty Blu-ray. They did a Dragon Dynasty DVD and Blu-ray of this film. But this Blu-ray is from 2010, and it has not been reprinted since. So nowadays, this thing fetches a high price online.
And it's one of the few instances we can actively thank your old job at FYE for.
Yeah. Yeah, shout-outs to them. So before we get into it, last thing, I'm going to tell you all the description of this film. I will skip certain parts because it gets a little but whatever, like spoiler kind of stuff.
Territory.
All right. A trademark in film history, John Woo's Hard Boiled is nirvana for seekers of action. Chow Yun Fat stars as Tequila, a cop hell-bent on bringing down the gun smugglers responsible for his partner's death. He teams up with an undercover cop, Tony Leung, whose secret identity is a triad hitman hangs by a thread. The film raises gunfights to an art form with some of the most celebrated action sequences ever, including a close quarters tea house shootout and a monumental firefight through the halls of hospital. Simply put, Hard Boiled is one of the best action films of all time, which I can agree with, and they did have one extra little bit of help, which I think was pretty funny, which is the fact that Philip Chan, who plays Tequila's, the typical hard-assed, you gotta rein it in, you're killing me, supervisor. Philip Chan actually worked for the CIPD, which he actually worked for the CIP cop when he was younger, and he actually was the head of an undercover unit, and there is an undercover cop in this movie. So Philip Chan was actually able to help inform them about certain things.
All right.
So you guys you guys ready to get into the screening?
Sure.
All right. Time for Hard Boiled. All right, and we're back. And how funny would it be, Richie, if that sneeze you thought you were holding back there was when you actually sneezed? As soon as I was about to say "and," you just achoo! That would be great.
Another episode, another peak. Thank you, jackass.
Well, I had to sell.
You're very welcome.
I had to sell the sneeze. Okay. Yeah, I had to sell it.
Fine.
Okay, cool.
Anyway,
so we
intro.
are back from our screening of Hard Boiled, John Woo's big hurrah to the Hong Kong action film before he made his trek over to Hollywood, where he made some pretty solid films, some that get talked about more than others. Everyone talks about Face Off. Some that get glossed over but received a lot of praise back in the day that weren't as high key as other Woo movies like Wind Takers or Wind Talkers, I believe it was called. You know the one I'm talking about, the cage one?
Yeah.
That's all about code breaking during the war.
Yes.
Yeah.
The wall.
But no, this was my first time seeing this in a hot minute. It had been at least since around the time I was working at my old job, so at least 3 years ago. Might have been a bit more. Who knows?
Might have been a bit more, yeah.
3 or 4, because I only worked there for 2 years technically.
Yeah.
But this film, I've heard a lot of critics say this about this movie, which is that it ages like a fine wine. And yeah, that could not be more true. I'm going to say this here on the podcast right now, and some people might get mad about it.
Oh boy.
I think this might be one of, if not the greatest action film of all time.
I'm not going to disagree.
Because this film has so much characterization, so much heart, and just such amazing cinematography and acting. Chow Yun Fat is a superstar. He sells everything in this movie, and Tony Leung plays off of him perfectly, and you've got all sorts of great ensemble work. You really believe some of these actors in it. Like, for example, another person who I really enjoyed in this film was actually who I mentioned before, their boss, which was Philip Chan. He does a really good job playing, the head of like the division, the chief, your classic chief archetype. But he's smarter than a lot of those archetypes are, and he's got a lot more like gumption about him.
Yeah. So, first time I've seen this in many, many years, and to say that it got better with a more mature eye and a fresh perspective would be a tremendous understatement.
Yeah.
I love the cinematography. I love those absolutely wonderful continuous tracking shots. I love the acting. I love the score and the precision thereof. I love so much about this movie that I'm afraid that we're going to push the length so far. But everything that Daulton said,
it's worth talking about and covering.
Oh, yes, it is.
Because we want to sell this movie to you like we're distributors almost.
Exactly. But so I'm not taking the whole screen time on that front.
We got one last person we gotta pass this over to.
Erin.
So usually I'm not super big into action films, but I actually enjoyed this. It took me a little bit to get into, but once like the big action scenes started happening, I was like, okay, I can get into this. Acting was phenomenal. The soundtrack with its use of are you going to sneeze again?
No.
With its use of jazz, yeah.
With its use of jazz music to build basically both tension and also in certain scenes to kind of relax the audience, like a calm before the storm.
Yeah. When it knows the right types of jazz to use, because like when we're on our like character scenes, it's very moody, sort of like your classic film noir saxophone stuff and horns and all that. And like strings, but once you get into like the action scenes, it's all like the percussive side of jazz music, like the very intense sort of side of jazz, and it works so well, and it knows when to use the score and when not to. This score is like having a championship race car with a professional driver behind the wheel. It knows when to hit the gas and it knows when to ease off the gas.
That is quite the analogy there, brother, and very apropos.
Because most action scenes, they do these, like, a lot of action movies, my criticism for a lot of action films is they don't know how to properly do the soundtrack. They don't know when to, like, cut it, and this film knows to ease off of it to make it almost ambient and, like, you almost forget it's there. And then it knows when to go, all right, hit the what was the one percussive instrument you mentioned during the screening that you're like, oh, listen to that?
Clarinet, snare.
There was like a percussive instrument, like almost like a
the conga.
Yeah,
conga. Yeah,
that was Richie.
That was
yeah, Richie. Yeah, like when Richie's like, look at those congas, like they know when to put the percussive instruments back.
Yeah, they
in.
do. Just precision instrumentation there.
Yeah. So, you want to tell us some other stuff you really liked about this since, like, this is your first time?
Another thing I wanted to mention is the subtlety in the acting. Because it wasn't meant to be very, like, it's an action movie. It's not it's not meant to be over the top, but you do see that a lot in action movies, especially in, like, older Bruce Willis movies. Yeah. Or Die Hard, or like all those 80s and 90s action movies.
It's so funny that
Lethal Weapon.
To clarify, I love all those.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because the back of the box, and like at first you're like, okay, if you haven't seen this movie, you're gonna hear this quote and be like, okay, tone it down, buddy. But having seen it, no, this quote is so accurate. From Empire Magazine, more exciting than a dozen diehards. Which,
Yeah.
Yes.
Because,
Yes.
like, there's, like, Die Hard is a Bruce Willis vehicle. This film is a Chow Yun Fat vehicle, but it's about so much more than that. So that's why there's like scenes where you tense up, where you're like, oh, is Tony Leung gonna make it for this scene? Oh, did Chow get hit really bad there? Is he down for the count? Like, you worry that like there are consequences in this movie because the body toll of people in this film is so high.
It's insane.
Mexican standoff fans, rejoice. Because this has some of the best and tensest,
The needle drops in this are, oh,
just sublime.
And as I mentioned, the subtlety in the acting is something to be praised, because even something like we mentioned this in other movies we watched, but even subtle things like a change in facial movement or lifting an eyebrow or a little twitch can completely change this characterization in the scene, and that's something I really appreciate about this movie.
Yes.
amazing facial acting.
I said during screening, I turned to Daulton and I reminded him of
Richie's
how...
gonna make me sneeze. I'm sniffling now.
It's dusty down here. But I was talking to Daulton, and I had alluded to how Gromit of Wallace and Gromit could pack whole paragraphs worth of meaning in a single eye twitch.
There we go. Our
Bless
first sneeze.
Thank
Will
you.
it be the last sneeze?
And that whole paragraph and a facial expression is very much at play here. We, like, every single time a line could have conveyed something, you see it in their eyes, or in their brows, or...
Little body language movements, yeah.
And it is just so perfect. You would not expect that kind of subtlety from a big giant bullet
action movie.
a big giant bullet fest where everyone is a trained acrobat, but damn if they do not make the most of their cast.
Yeah.
You know what this reminds me of after seeing certain scenes in the movie, like the way that they try to jump around bullets and that kind of thing? So, here's the story. I loved Nerf guns when I was a kid, but I was never allowed to have them because my parents thought I would shoot my sister in the eye.
Oh my god, it's a Christmas story.
Yeah, it basically was. It basically was, because my sister shot me in the neck with a Nerf gun once, and then my parents were like, "You're never getting Nerf guns ever again." Because the worst part is it happened while my parents were driving, and my sister was in the front seat, and I was in the back. No, it was the other way around, because she shot me in the back of the neck. Well, my mom was driving, but anyway. I saw Die Hard when I was in, like, middle school.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I saw it around that time, too, myself.
I saw a couple of the sequels, and then I was like, I want to do this with Nerf guns. And I only knew one person who had Nerf guns, and it was my friend Tiffany's younger brother. And I tried to, and I think I also saw Wanted around that time, too. And I tried to, like, dodge a bullet against
Jesus
it.
Christ.
But yeah, I tried to do a bunch of cool stuff with Nerf guns, and some people got hurt. Just gonna say that.
No, really?
But watching action scenes watching like scenes in action movies where there's characters who are just like running around or jumping or dodging bullets and like doing cool stuff and basically like parkouring around while shooting just reminds me of being a kid and firing Nerf guns in my friend's backyard.
Yeah.
There's this same sort of kinetic feel to it, where everyone is just moving at all times. You get most action movies have a lot of cover-based action, and that's fine. There's tension in those, and especially if you do something creative with it.
Like they mentioned Die Hard. Like, there's a lot of that in Die Hard, for example.
And to allude to an episode we've done, you can put cool spins on it, like in Near Dark.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this movie understands that movement is important in action scenes,
Mm-hmm.
but also controlled movement.
Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of ducking around.
That's
There's
why
a
we
bunch
bring
of-
up jazz, because this film feels like jazz, you know?
Yeah. There's no constant movement and there's no constant stillness. It's all very precise and
Just like-
very controlled.
Just like jazz, it's about the notes you're not playing.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can't say much about jazz because I'm classically trained, so sorry.
That's okay. I think I'm mostly talking from like what I've read on jazz and like Kids on the Slope and stuff like that.
Yeah, I happen to be acquainted with some jazz players. In fact, in high school, my friends, if they weren't chorus boys, they were people in the jazz band. And there is a lot of that free-form spirit going on in this movie. No one performance of a song they did was ever the same. And I had been to a lot of joint band and chorus concerts back in high school. And I remember a little anecdote. I remember just squealing my head off because I'm having lunch in the chorus room one day, and what is my high school jazz band playing? Tank.
Yeah, because this movie, there's like some little mini action sequences. I would say this film has 3 big action sequences. I would count the one scene at like the dock as like a minor action scene. Doesn't go on that
Yeah.
long, but
It's like a smaller. It's like half the length of the big 3.
yeah, not even, I would say, because you
Like
have
a quarter.
Yeah, because like you have like a few big this movie basically has 3 big set pieces. There's the tea house, the factory,
And the hospital.
and the hospital. And and now I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot for an action movie. I'm thinking of like all these other action movies that all have these big sequences, but it's like we said, it's like jazz. It's about the notes you're not playing, and the connective tissue is what makes those scenes go much harder.
For context, as alluded to in the intro, this is the story of Tequila, a hard-boiled cop who specializes in raids and
Shootouts, basically.
shootouts and interventions between gang activities. And he is on the trail of a notorious crime boss with the help of an undercover cop named Alan.
Yeah, so basically you've got Johnny and Uncle Ho, who have 2 different like parts of the triad. Uncle
Uncle
Ho,
Hoy.
Uncle Hoy,
Hoy, yeah.
Uncle Hoy's like the head of it. He's like the old man, you know. He's the honorable old soldier, the one who like employed like most of the triads we see in this until there's. This isn't even spoilers because it's a major part of the plot, you know. It's like
We'll
like,
mark them.
yeah, you know, this movie concerns like triad wars and like how like this big triad is trying to like, you know, oust one another. Like, well, more Johnny, like Uncle Hoy is just content with how things are going, and you've got undercover cops trying to take everything down. Specifically, the 2 main cops. You've got Tequila, who's like, you know, he's the light, but he's always playing the bad guy. He's always the bad guy. He's always the one people come down on. He's on the outs of a messy breakup. He literally doesn't even have like a house anymore. He's living in the jazz bar.
Or living on a boat.
Yeah, and he even, you know, there's some nice social commentary here about how like government workers can't even afford to live in like government, like, you know, like can't afford anything in Hong Kong from how expensive it is. And he even says, he's like, you know, it sucks I'd be single because I'm single because I can't even get government housing now.
Literally goes to a shrine to try and turn
Pray,
his luck
yeah.
around on that front.
On both fronts. And I almost have a feeling that maybe the reason why this didn't like go over as well is because John Woo was kind of, he doesn't paint the cops in a perfect light in this movie. You know, he shows them as flawed, which they like the Hong Kong government probably was not very happy about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an understatement. They get a lot of people killed in this movie.
Yeah. And while they do show they're right in certain scenarios, they also show, like, come on, why would you ever, like, trust that? Like, when, like, the big, I'm not going to say it yet because spoilers, but when, like, the big, like, reveal happens at the end and, like, the cops, like, oh, you got to listen to me. They're like, no, I'm doing my job here. Why should I, like, believe that fairy tale that you're telling me, basically? Like, you expect me to believe something that ludicrous? And you get where he's coming from, but we got to give credit to some other people in this film, because as great as Tony Leung is, as great as Chow Yun Fat is, Teresa Mo as Teresa Chang, she's really good in this movie. She plays off everyone well. She does not take bullshit from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And we already mentioned Philip Chan, but Philip Kwok is so good as Mad Dog.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, he's my favorite actor in this, because he
doesn't have a lot of lines, so he has to do a lot of facial, like, subtle acting.
So much facial acting, and once again, sublimely executed on his end. He plays the part of
the honorable assassin, essentially, you know.
As honorable as one can get in the triads, anyway.
Yeah.
Which is impressive because...
And it makes sense, too, because they established he was working for Uncle Hoy.
Yeah, so he would be following traditions. What's impressive is...
Well, he wasn't working for Uncle Hoy, but he knew of Uncle Hoy.
Yeah. What's impressive is that he has such an intimidating image. You'd think that this would be the guy who has no ethics and he's just cold and methodical like a Chinese Terminator. But he does have a sense of honor about him, and we will gladly discuss that once we get to spoilers.
Yeah.
But you feel for him, honestly, because he gets put through so much shit and has to see so many dirty deeds unfold in front of him. And I can feel the AC/DC joke formulating in your head right now.
No, it's not even that. I just wanted to say, and like, I know Anthony Wong hated doing this movie. I know he hated working for John Woo. I know he hated his character, but like, he's so good as Johnny Wong.
He's such a piece of shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You hate him so much. He sells how much of a scumbag this guy is.
Like, you have a feeling that he just kicks puppies.
Yeah, for fun, because he's just malicious. He mocks people all the time. He has no code of honor. And like, he's such a scumbag that his enforcers have to tell him, hey, maybe you should dial it in because you're being such a scumbag that it's actually hurting us.
Suck my triad cock, bitch.
Yeah, and he's literally just like, shut up, I'm the boss, you listen to me.
Oh, I peaked it this time.
Your fault.
I made my own work.
And man, it is a bullet ballet. It is excellently choreographed.
Not hyperbole.
With just the perfect movements. Even what looks like fumbles are intentional, but they are sold perfectly.
It is just like theater productions wish they had this much precision and this much beauty amidst the chaos.
Honestly, like, the score in the hospital shootout is some of the best score work I can think of for action scenes. It's so intense, it gets you on the edge of your seat. Like, every shot feels, you know, like a needle drop. You tense up. You're like, who went down? Who's gonna get hit? Oh my god, is a civilian gonna get hurt? How many people will die?
And I do not say this lightly, Daulton. You know who I am when I'm saying this. I don't think I've seen this much tension in standoffs and shootouts in most Western movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our younger audience members will probably hate me for saying this, but they literally don't make action movies like this anymore. Like, the amount of practical effect works
Oh god, yeah.
and squibs, glorious glorious squibs. I am so sick of these modern action films just like cutting back on the practical effects department.
So clean.
So clean and surgical, and taking away the work from the hard work and VFX people who do the on the ground, practical makeup work and everything.
Make things messy.
Exactly.
Blow shit up.
I know it's less realistic, but it feels more impactful when you do it this way. Like, no amount of CGI injuries or like fake like CGI blood is ever going to take away from the impact one squib has.
Like, that's the thing that I think Tarantino's movies did well.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like Django Unchained and Kill Bill, and even though I'm not the hugest fan, Hateful Eight made you believe people were getting fucked up.
Give us the squibs. That'll be one of our first shirts. It'll say "Give us the squibs."
That'll be a hell of a graphic for you.
Yeah.
I will work on that. I promise you. I'll put it up in post.
Like a picture, like a thing of an angry me covered with like blood holes. It just says "Give us the squibs."
No, I have an idea.
Yeah.
No, what you do is you do like a blood splatter, but as like a positive, and use negative font to say "Give us the squibs" over the blood splatter.
Oh, or even better, you have a white T-shirt that's that's
with
covered
red.
with fake
Red.
blood stains, and in the blood is written "Give us the squibs."
Yeah, that's what I was going
that's
for.
a good one. That's a good one.
Can we also mention how?
Please.
Yes, please.
Be my guest.
How gorgeous practical effects are.
Oh.
Because although things like real fire and explosions are incredibly dangerous,
Yeah, they're so cool though.
they're so cool, and they look so much better than someone just having fun in After Effects.
Yeah, and you can tell the actors are actually scared, which makes these scenes more impactful.
It makes it look better. And I wanted to say another thing. When I was watching this movie, once I got into it, I could not get out of it.
Yeah, it's
Right?
adrenaline.
It's adrenaline because at certain points there was no suspension of disbelief for me.
Yeah.
Like, I was just
It just
completely
sucks you
involved in
in.
the movie. And this is going to be a little thing. I don't how they incorporate, there's a couple scenes involving solfege code,
Yeah, the musical code, yeah.
which is like, hey, here's like some popular songs.
Uh-huh.
And then these are how this is the solfege for those songs and the numbers they correlate to figure out what the code means.
Decoding? Oh, that's so
Which I
cool.
think is just absolute genius.
It's such an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Further weaves the musical identity of this movie.
Yeah, music is
into
huge
the
part.
narrative.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because like Tequila hangs out in a jazz bar and plays clarinet in it. His buddy, his partner, who like gets killed at the very beginning of the movie, was a drum player.
Was a drummer.
Was a drummer, and they would play on the off nights there, and that's like the main hangout. And I appreciate that because like a lot of action films just don't give downtime where the main characters get away from like the other main characters to just like do things.
It's not boring either because a lot of characterization is going on for Tequila and
Yeah, when he's talking with
Alan, right?
And when Tequila's talking with Mr. Wu, who is played by John Woo, and is a former cop running the bar that they hang out at, and he gives like Tequila like fatherly advice, It goes to show that Tequila is not the perfect super cop like the public seems to believe he is, and he has weaknesses.
Yeah, he's a human.
Yeah.
And man, there's so much to talk about this. I think for a second here, I want to get into the impact of this, because you can really see the impact of this. John Woo was heavily influential on a lot of action movies of the following years after this. Aside from his Hollywood stint, you had just, movies like The Matrix is obviously heavily influenced by John Woo's stuff.
This movie and a bunch of John Woo movies before this practically invented gun fu.
Yeah, and that whole trope. I wouldn't be surprised if, action with jazz influences might have led to a bit of influence on Bebop. I'd have to look
Cowboy
that
Bebop.
up.
Yeah, because this came out in 92.
Yeah, this came out a few years before Bebop did.
Yeah.
And Another thing is this movie was heavily influential, and Wu's works in general were heavily influential in the worlds of video games.
Mm-hmm.
The highly choreographed and stylistic gunfights led a lot of developers to going, whoa, could we make gunfights that look like that?
Case in point, Max Payne.
Yeah, made by the legendary, I believe they're Finnish development team, Remedy. Are they Finnish?
I believe so.
Let me find out. Give
Yeah.
me a second.
But that was the biggest, developed by Sam Lake from Remedy, of course, who is the father of the first two games, before the rights got sold.
Finish.
Finish?
You're right.
I was right. I thought I was. Remedy's like my favorite game studio, so because like Remedy's never had a miss, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, Max Payne 3 wasn't as good as the other Max Paynes," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, that one was actually developed by Rockstar, so that tells you what you need to know there."
Anyway,
But this movie was so influential in the world of video games that eventually some smart Midway executives went, "Wait, if John Woo is influential on video games so much, why don't we make a John Woo video game?" And Midway Entertainment were like, okay, we all really like Stranglehold. That we all really liked Hard Boiled. That was like, you know, the film that like a lot of action nerds in the US love. Like that's like his big boy over here. And they decided to make a straight up sequel to Hard Boiled in video game form called Stranglehold. Probably not the smartest move from a marketing decision, though, because while John Woo is a big name and Hard Boiled is a big name in action circles, they were still cult followings over here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this is a action film niche that they're marketing to.
Yeah, and Midway always had trouble with home development. They started out as an arcade business, and they never quite got out of it. Like, they got out of it, but once they hit home development, they never quite succeeded as much.
Which unfortunately put basically all the nails
In the
their
coffin.
coffin.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, as good as Stranglehold was and as well as it reviewed, it only sold about 1 million copies, and it cost so much money due to like being so slavish to the detail of actual Woo movies that the development time went on forever. The cost was high, and it was probably one of the big contributing factors to the eventual closing of Midway only a few years later, because the game came out in 2007 and Midway closed in 2010.
Sucks.
Yeah. But if you guys end up liking this and you want more of it, and you're like, okay, I want to watch more Woo movies, obviously go do that. But if you were ever like, hey, what would a John Woo video game be like? Go play Stranglehold. It's literally a direct sequel to this.
With Chow Yun Fat voicing Tequila.
And John Woo even reprises his role as
Mr.
Woo, and he the menu, I remember this, the menu is actually the bar. And like you like go through the different parts of the bar for the menu scene and stuff.
I just found out
Oh,
it's on
that.
PC. I'm gonna try and get it.
It's very good. I highly recommend it. Definitely either play, if you're going to play this, play it on a 360 or on a PC that can run it, because PS3 was not very good for high octane action stuff.
Yeah.
And it really chugged and murdered the frame rate for a lot of video games.
We gotta stream this for our Patreon.
Yes,
do.
yeah.
We-
Because
Stranglehold, baby.
yeah.
We
Yep.
Oh, hey, how about we do a playthrough for the Patreon? Whole playthrough.
I would love that.
Let's do it.
I'll be at the
Yeah.
controls. Because you know it's basically a Max Payne game, and I have the most experience in that department. So, unlike
Yeah, you
off.
can get it on GOG.
yeah, and unlike most of
Yeah.
and one interesting thing that contrasts it from the Max Payne games is the environment is actually incorporated into the action more like John Woo movies. Like there's carts. Like if you see a cart on the environment, you can dive onto it and it'll start sliding, and you can like slide and shoot. Just like in the iconic opening scene, you can slide down banisters and stuff. There was another John Woo movie where someone like jumps on a chandelier and swings across it to shoot.
Yeah.
You can do that in the game. Like the environment plays into the game so much.
Enough about my Patreon showing, though, Daulton. Let's mark it right here to talk about spoilers.
Yeah, we're
At the
gonna.
49-minute mark.
Yep. Well, we usually do it towards the end anyway. But yeah, right before we get into spoilers, real quick, I'm just gonna say, turn off now if you like it. We all really like the movie. We highly recommend you like it.
Watch it.
Uh,
Watch it.
Yeah, if it's available in your region, just stream it. If not, use a VPN. Like I said, not sure if it's available for streaming in America. Didn't look like it. It might have been on Criterion, but I think it might have also been in another region. I don't think it's in America because the distribution rights in America are owned by Miramax, and Miramax is just not doing anything with it right now, which is very frustrating. Either buy an imported Blu-ray that functions on your region player, or just use a VPN or something, or some other methods I will not say that would get us demonetized. So at the 50-minute mark here, we are into spoiler territory.
So, first and foremost, we gotta talk about the characterization going on, because that's the first thing that I couldn't talk about outside of spoilers. But, I still...
I don't think it's on Disney Plus.
I don't know. Let's find out. Apparently, using your mom's Disney Plus, it might be on here. Nope, not available in your region.
Yeah.
That sucks. But... holy shit, the characterization. Mad Dog, in particular, is one that stood out to me as one of the best honorable villains in an action movie.
Yeah,
because
he's a lot smarter than he looks, too.
Yeah, like, you think, like I said, this guy kind of reminded me of the villain from Battle Royale. You know, the one kid, right?
Yeah.
Like, just the look. He was tall. He was the guy with the rifle, the emotionally blunted kid who didn't really talk, and he just killed a whole bunch of guys.
I wonder if Mad Dog was an inspiration for Majima. The eye patch.
The eye patch? The Mad Dog of Shimano?
Yeah, and not only that, but Mad Dog appears unhinged, but he's smarter than he looks and has a lot of honor to him, just like Majima.
That tracks.
That would.
Not to mention, like, you would think this guy is just a fucking brute. You would think he's just there to do all the dirty work, but then the hospital shootout happens.
And even before that, like, there's hints that he hates Alan because he doesn't even know Alan is, like, an undercover cop, but Alan did betray Uncle Hoy. And for him, that's like a big, like, wow, you're a scumbag. I know I'm working for, like, the guy you're also working for that you betrayed your boss for, but I don't play like that. That's a rat move.
And I think my favorite scene in the whole movie, and this is saying something.
Yeah, because there's a lot. Yeah.
Like, it's like picking a favorite kid. But my favorite scene is hands down the best standoff among all the standoffs. When Mad Dog and Alan
they're like, you know,
are in the middle of the hospital.
The big final climactic scene, and Alan, you know, Tequila and Alan get separated because of fires and stuff. Alan's like, I'm going after Mad Dog. You take care of, like, getting these kids out of here. And Tequila wants to go help him, but, you know, like, debris falls, blocks off the area. They run into each other in a hallway, and they find, oh, wait. There's still civilians here, and they have guns pointed at each other.
With civilians between
them. On, like, crutches, nurses, there's all sorts of people, and they both just give each other a look, and they put their guns down.
And it's written clear on their faces, no words.
Yeah.
You can see their eyes
They're
saying,
like, we're not firing our guns until these people are gone.
Not now.
They put aside their differences to tell these people, you need to get out of here.
It also plays so perfectly into what a piece of shit
Wong is.
Yeah.
Because then he struts in
and just shoots them down.
And the fucking reaction of Mad Dog is just like,
he gives him a chance. He almost gives him a chance. He's like, you shouldn't have done that.
You fucking piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wong just shoots him.
And he runs out of ammo, but there's a look in his eyes that almost screams, worth it.
Yeah, Mad Dog has this look of, like, I'm gonna take this bullet, but you should know, if there had been just one bullet in this gun, you would have been dead.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It is so good.
And Wong does get his comeuppance, don't get us wrong, but you get the sense, if Wong hadn't, that man would have been haunted by a very angry ghost for the rest of his life.
I'm
Yep.
so sad. You know what I'm sad about? I wish we got Oathbreaker for this. She would have loved this.
Yeah, she
Oh
would've
yeah,
loved this.
yeah. Our mutual friend, we would have loved this. It totally her. I could see her really digging the action in this. And if
Movie night. Let's
Oh,
make
yeah.
it a movie night.
and if another friend of ours, good old Trin, hasn't seen this, we'll have to show it to them sometime. I feel like Trin would really dig this.
Yeah, they would.
But the climactic action sequence, it even puts the earlier tea house and factory sequence to shame, which is saying something because they're all some of the finest action put to cinema, in my opinion.
Like, bad action movies would coast on these scenes and have that be the substance, but there are layers to it.
Yeah, like, let me put it this way. There are action films where there's, like, a bunch of action scenes, but there's one big scene everyone talks about. Like, for the first Terminator movie, it's the cop. It's the police station scene. For Terminator 2, it's the
Foundry.
office. Well, I would say the office building, because that's, like, the really big action scene with all the, like... They literally blew up an entire building for that.
Fair.
But, or arguably the chase scene.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot in Terminator 2.
Yeah, Terminator 2, not as much of a good example. But even one of my personal favorite action movies, Highlander. Everyone just talks about the very end scene. That's all anyone ever talks about.
final sword fight.
The final sword fight on the silver what was it again? Silver something. I can't believe I forgot.
I don't know.
The big fat old abandoned building, the silver building. I forget.
Good
the full
thing
name.
this is under spoilers, by the way.
But yeah, true. Yeah. It's Highlander. Like, I love Highlander, but I doubt people are going to care about Highlander spoilers.
Silver Cup Studio.
Silver Cup, yeah, that's the one.
Oath might, because that's our guest episode.
True. Well, probably turned off for spoilers if she watched this by now.
I'll bleep it.
Yeah.
I'll bleep it.
Oh, sorry.
I'll bleep it.
Our friend, bleh. But anyway,
I'll fix it in post. We're good.
my bad.
I'm the editor. We're
Yeah,
fine.
instinct, you know how it is. This whole film just has so much perfect sequences, and there's not a wasted moment.
No, there is not. Like I said, the practical effects are the highlight. If there's an object that could be destroyed in a gunfight, it will be. If there's something that needs to explode, it's blowing the fuck up. And
If there's something that doesn't need to explode, screw it. We're going to explode it anyway because it looks cool.
Yeah.
And if there's an injury that needs to be sustained or could be sustained, it
Yeah,
will.
it'll probably get sustained. We're sorry about that, but, you know, it's an action film.
It's like if Murphy's Law were
Reversed.
for the purposes of creating the best fucking action movie ever.
Yeah, and luckily
And
no one gets hurt in a major way in this film, luckily.
Everything that can go right will go right.
Yeah, even if it's just barely.
Even if it's just barely. Reverse Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
And there are so many movies like of this mold that has the prototypical tough guy with a soft center, but Tequila just has so much nuance, and there's so much intricate acting and directing work going into the portrayal of said soft moments, especially in the hospital scene, where suddenly the dude who has piled up bodies
Takes time to comfort a baby. Yeah.
he plugs his ears and sings to him in the middle of a fucking gunfight.
Does an improvisational, like, rap in the middle of a gunfight, and, like, any other actor would have failed this scene, never been able to sell it. But, like, Chow Yun Fat makes it feel so humble, and just, like, that this is just something someone's doing in like, the heat of the moment, and they're just like, he literally says, I can't sing, you know?
It helps that Chow Yun Fat is just a cool dude.
He's just so charismatic. Like, the weird ass way the guy drinks tequila that gives him his namesake. Like, and no one else could sell that, but he sells it. Because it's like a tequila soda that he makes, basically.
Yeah,
It's like tequila and seltzer.
Yeah, unrelated to tequila, I love the way he drinks Alka-Seltzer in that one scene.
Where he just chugs it
Where he
down.
just, like, drops it in, waits for it to foam all the way to the top, and just chugs the glass of Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah, like, no one, like, that's so cool. Like, no one would ever do that. And, like, that should... Honestly, that alone shows how much of a badass he is, because even I have to, like, take little sips of Alka-Seltzer, because that stuff is bitter, you know?
Yeah.
But he just chugs that stuff back.
He takes it like a man.
It's so good. And
Also, that was a weird little pop there.
yeah,
but-
I see the weird little... But anyway, and I want to say most action films, their endings, like one problem I have with action films is a lot of endings of them are kind of like...
Anticlimactic.
Yeah, and they just feel kind of like unearned, or they just feel like a Whitest Kids You Know sketch where it's like, we didn't know how to end this, so it's just over now. But this, oh my God, it feels, you go from triumph to tragedy because you're like, oh no, oh, Alan, he's gone, he didn't make it. And you see the sad score, and they do the same thing they did with the beginning of the movie where there was like the cop who got killed, the undercover cop that got killed, and they burn his file for like the safety of like everyone in the family. And it's like, oh man, what's gonna happen? Who's gonna, like, oh, Alan, you're gone. And then it cuts to the paper cranes getting thrown, which they established earlier. That's like Alan puts one of those up for every person he kills. And you see those cranes going into the ocean, and you're like, oh, Tequila's cleaning up his boat, like it's gone. And then you see it's Alan that tossed those cranes into the ocean, and the score goes from sad up into an upswing, and it gets like all funky as he sails off into the sunset. And you just go, you're like, yeah, he made it, woo! And it's so earned. It's earned. It really is earned. You feel like, oh man, like, you know, this is ending on a bit of a downer. They got him, but at what cost? And then when you see Alan lived and he's battered and bruised, it's just like, yes.
Like, talk about a movie that makes fake outs work. Any other movie would have it be so trite, but because John Woo is behind this, and he knows what he's doing, and
Michael Gibbs, like I said, he nails that score work at the end there. Like, the score itself fakes you out.
yeah, it's so good.
It's so somber. It's like the saddest track in the film. And you're like, oh no. And then it starts to change tempo once it pans up and you see it's Alan, and then it hits into full swing as the end credits are going with him sailing off into the sunset, and you're just like, yeah.
Most movies that we cover on here, like even the really good ones, you've got your movies like Ghost Dog and Quadrophenia, where we can be so dignified about the themes and stuff. You can't be restrained when talking about Hard Boiled, though.
No.
Like,
This movie, we got to be as bombastic as the movie itself is.
Like, normally I am just so detached from anything, but my inner man-child is just so in love with this movie.
Yeah, and God, I just love the beautiful poetry of the entire time. Johnny Wong, he's just Mr. Big. Oh, you gotta have all the big guns. Oh, I'm gonna kill you with my big guns. And he's always shit talking the cops for using, like, you know, your little service pistols and stuff.
And
specifically says 38s, and he makes fun of 38s, and that's literally what takes him out. And I love it too because there's so much eye work with Johnny Wong. Like, they focus on his eyes so much, and how does he get killed? Eye
Through
shot.
the eye. And I remember, I gotta talk about that moment where it looks like Tequila's surrendering, and he's
Then
on his
Alan
back
gives
feet.
him that opening, you know?
Alan gives him the opening, and even before that, he's getting down, and I notice him doing the squint. And I turn to Daulton. Erin looks like she's on the edge of her friggin' seat, and I'm like, oh my God, he's doing it. It's not over, Erin. He's squinting.
And even
He's
then they
turning
fake you.
his head.
And even then they fake you out because you think he's going to do the movie thing with the perfect shot, you know, that kills the bad guy without like any casualties. But no, Alan has to give him that opening.
Alan has to take the fall.
Yeah,
And it is the perfect ending to his character.
yeah. Like, this is a guy who's been sacrificing everything, and the one final sacrifice that he does is the one that gets him so rewarded afterwards.
He may have stabbed a lot of backs. He may have done things he wasn't proud of.
But he got the happy ending he deserved.
He did, yeah.
He made the most meaningful sacrifice, and he
Was rewarded for it, yeah.
he went out like a fucking hero.
Yep, and he sailed off into the sunset like an old West hero, and
Died with his boots on.
yep. But lived in this case, like we said, because Alan just, like, he sails off into the sunset.
I was talking about oh wait, shit. Right, that fake out.
The fake out,
Oh,
yeah.
this movie is so good.
Yeah, you just, like, forget certain things almost.
Like, you're so lost in, oh my, this movie strings you along, man.
And I think we can. Do you want to get out of spoiler territories here?
Yeah, out of spoiler right here.
Yeah, at the 1013, 10513.
10513.
So
See this movie.
yeah. And another thing I just want to say, it's a weird thing to say about an action movie. It's such a good length. Action movies either go on too long or they're not long enough, and they like skim out a lot of the character stuff, so it feels a lot more hollow. This is just over 2 hours. Just a little over 2 hours, and boy, does it know how to use that time.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
we could go on and on and on about this.
But overall, I just think that this is one of the finest, not just one of the finest action films of the 90s. I think if you're going to do like a high-octane, gunplay-heavy film, this is a required viewing.
Oh, yeah.
Watch it.
And especially if you're going for the more stylistic approach to gunfights. There's room for your more like grounded high octane action like John Wick, which is like they try to be as slavish to like realism as possible in that film.
And it does work in its own way.
And it does work in its own way. It's great in its own way, but there's something to be said for spectacle, choreographed bullet ballet stuff like this. And in my opinion, it's one of the finest action films of all time. It's a bit hard to seek out in America or just like this territory, Canada in general. Maybe check your secondhand stores. You're like
FYEs.
yeah, you're an FYE or just even like, a local secondhand movie store that sells old movies. The libraries even. Libraries can have stuff that's very hard and rare to find sometimes on the market.
Appreciate your libraries.
Yeah. Yeah, your local library might have this, and it's worth getting a library card even if you never use it. I got my library card like a year ago. Still haven't used it, but just the fact that I got registered in the system means that your local library will get more funding.
Yep. Take that as a PSA from Killer Score.
And also for those of you who are like, I don't know but what use do I have for a library card? One, you shouldn't have to care about that and you should do it anyway. But I will give you one thing. There are actual streaming services out there, look it up, that work with library cards.
It's called Canopy. That's one of them.
Yeah, Canopy's one of them. And there's another one that I'm forgetting right now. You can look them up for yourselves. But use them. Get a library card. Use them. It's a free streaming service. You just need a library card. And library cards nowadays don't cost anything.
Yeah, it's Canopy and Hoopla.
Yeah, Canopy and Hoopla, and I think there might even be another one. But the point is, get a library card, people.
Yeah.
All right. So, you have eaten your audio vegetables. Now comes the dessert, because October is upon us.
Yep, this is what Killer Score was made for. As you know from our name, we are a big fan of horror films and horror film composers. So our annual Spooky Month festivals are upon us. October, the shocking month. Shocktober. I'm vamping here, can you tell? I want to give a little time so we can have our final thoughts wrapped up about Hard Boiled before we get into the big spoiler. I'm teasing you a little bit. No, it's fine. I'm teasing you a little bit. Overall, love this film. Amazing action movie. Probably one of the best ever made, in my opinion. But maybe John Woo's best. I have to watch a bit more of his filmography, I admit. I've seen a few, aside from Hard Boiled. I've seen The Killer. I've seen, like, bits and pieces of his American stuff. But I really want to watch more now, again, after seeing this.
Best movie.
Probably, yeah. Erin, your thoughts?
Thoroughly enjoyed. Let me grab the mic.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Love the action. Love the acting. Score is phenomenal, and highly recommend.
Yeah.
Up to you, Richie.
What a piece of art, of beautiful, chaotic, yet wonderfully choreographed and crafted art. It really is a bullet ballet in the truest sense, and I am so glad that I revisited this, because
Same.
snippets were not enough. Clearly, this is just perfection.
Yeah, it's art in its sheerest form that you can do within the action genre.
Yeah.
And now we move to darker pastures.
Yep. Fall has officially begun. We are doing this shortly after fall started. And, the weather's getting colder. It's going to get darker out sooner now. So it's the perfect time to put on the horror films, which is what we will be covering all next month. And Richie, you are kicking us off this year.
Yeah. And since there are not as many vampire westerns as I'd like there to be, well, there can't be a vampire western for every Richie episode, guys.
I mean, I think you could argue Demon Knight kind of is a bit,
However, I have something planned, and I wanted to sneak up on you with this because this was actually a suggestion by you. Pardon me for...
I might have a feeling.
Pardon me for switching up the tone on this, but I think this needs a special introduction. This next episode of Killer Score is brought to you by our first actually real sponsor ever, New World Pictures. That's right, we've got a hot item on our hands from the brilliant mind of Larry Cohen, with tasty treats, not so tasty monsters, and more than a hint of capitalist satire. Side effects may include mild narrative confusion, nausea, and addiction. Because as our sponsors say, enough is never enough with the stuff.
Whoa, that's right. We will see you for the satirical horror musical, The Stuff.